Hi, this is your host of Bhartia and welcome to your Let's Talk. Today we have with us Maxime Lamothe-Brassard, CEO and co-founder of LimaCharlie. Maxime, it's great to have you on the show.
Pleasure to be here.
It's my pleasure actually. And since you are a co-founder of the company as well, so I would love to know a bit about the history and the story of the company, why you created the company, and also talk a bit about your own background. What problem you saw in the space that you felt like solving, which led to the creation of this company?
My background very quickly is that I've been cybersecurity for my whole career. I started in Canada in intelligence, and then since then I've worked at CrowdStrike, Google, and Chronicle Security. So I've worked in a lot of different places. When I left Chronicle Security is really the time that it was obvious for me that I had to go and start something. I'd always had this entrepreneurial spirit. The big question was, what to start, right? Where, my personality is I didn't want to do something that the same thing that everybody else is doing. It's just not me. And at the same time, I've been a practitioner for a really, really long time in cybersecurity. And so what really kind of drove me to do what we're doing with LimaCharlie was that realization that there's a lot of practitioners like me that understand cybersecurity well. They're professionals, and at the same time, the access to so many of the tools that are used to do cybersecurity are either really, really difficult to get access to, or they're designed for, way down market, meaning, so that, your grandma puts it on her computer and now she's safe. But if you're a practitioner, if you're a cybersecurity professional, you want to be able to have control over the tool, right? You want to really be able to kind of put your knowledge into practice through that tool. And so that's why really foundationally, I wanted to create a very technical product that could also be given in a really accessible way to all of the industry.
And when the company was created, as you're talking before recording, around 2018, when you bootstrapped the company, and now we are looking at 2024, how has the market evolved in this couple of years? Which also means that how LimaCharlie has also evolved.
Things have changed and at the same time not changed, right? So cybersecurity, a lot around cybersecurity hasn't changed fundamentally, especially if you're looking at the vendor space, the products, the companies that are putting things out there. However, what has changed is the maturity level in the industry. The number of people that are cybersecurity practitioners that are able to, have like a reasoned technical conversation around what they're doing, how they're building things, that has gone up quite a bit. And that's been really great for us because, put as a one-liner, right, what we're doing is we're building a cloud provider for cybersecurity capabilities. And so it means that for us and for us to find the market, we had to kind of meet the market where it's people that are doing the job of cybersecurity that also need to be able to do this at scale, whether it's an enterprise or in services. And so, 10 years ago, it wouldn't have made sense. In the same way that if you tried to start AWS, in 1990, it just wouldn't have made sense. But now you get to, 2005, and all of a sudden, that is the thing, that made a lot of sense because you had all these practitioners that needed access to IT capabilities. So for us, it's the same thing. We're seeing that the market is really meeting, what we're building more and more every day.
When you're talking about the market, I want to look at it from two aspects. As you're also earlier mentioned, if some of these companies were started way back, the time was not right. Now there could be two things. One is that the market is ready for a company like LimaCharlie, and that is why you are seeing the adoption. Or second is that there was this gap in demand, nobody was fulfilling it. So when LimaCharlie came in, so one could be that there was a demand, or the other one was that, hey, just the way Steve Jobs used to say, if you ask people, they will ask for the faster horses, not the cars. So I want to look at, how do you look at this space?
I think that's exactly correct, right? It's there's a feedback loop going in there, in the sense that look, in if I kind of look at cybersecurity in 2005, right? Cybersecurity was still this very opaque industry with a few people that kind of knew what was happening, and I kind of always joke, the two guys with the hoodies in the basement, right? That was what cybersecurity was. But that's not what it is anymore. So we know that the practitioners, the best way that I kind of demonstrate it when I talk to technical people is I'm able to talk to a cybersecurity practitioner and just say, hey, I have an EDR, and EDR is endpoint detection response. It's a category in cybersecurity, and people know 90% of what I'm talking about. They don't need to know the brand. They don't need to know anything. There's more and more understanding around the core values and aspects of cybersecurity. So that's going up. But to your point, if, cybersecurity, the things that haven't changed is around the vendor space, right? So vendors, since I started around like 2007, the vendors call themselves different names, but there's not actually much that's changed under the hood. And so until you can actually demonstrate to people and go like, hey, you can get access to these things in a way that, you control it, you can build on top of it. And here it is, I'm giving it to you in your hands. That's when people really start realizing. When we started, all the time, we would talk to people, and one of the first questions, after we kind of talked about the product or gave a demo, was, hey, what's the big service agreement that I need to go through and like sign and get my legal people so that I can get access to the platform? And if you're thinking in terms of cloud provider, right? No, it's everybody. It's a utility. A cloud provider is a utility. Everybody and anybody can get access to whatever they need, whenever they need it. And so until you actually have that experience, you'd think it's impossible. But then when you start to have it, you kind of look back, and it's today, would you ever go back to those dark days pre-cloud providers? Well, that would be pretty painful.
Security is, unlike previous time, is an enabler. You put enough guardrails, protection, so developers know that they can freely innovate. Earlier it was, I don't know what to do because. So how do you look at security now, where first of all it is becoming a priority? It's no longer anyone else's problem. It is kind of board level discussion. Is their companies changing their culture? It's not just about tools. They are bringing the cultural changes, and then also security is an enabler. How do you look at this thought process around security? I don't want to look at security as a gloomy, dark, dangerous thing versus something which is like when you sit in your car or you fly, because of those security precautions and measures, you are relaxed, you enjoy your drink, you are not worried about the of course, if you're not in a max plane. But I want to look at the positive aspects of security. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. Signs of the maturity of the industry are everywhere, right? You mentioned it from the C-suite perspective, right? There are CISOs, and in the boardroom it's being discussed, but all the way even down to the very technical level, it's the same. We have things like the MITRE attack framework, right? Which is the industry starting to reason at a technical level about the types of attacks and how to structure, how to conceptualize those attacks. So I think all of the markers are going in that direction, which is really, really great, because it's going to take us out slowly out of what I think is kind of the most negative part historically of our industry, which is because very few people understood security, understood even how to evaluate the risk, right? Like, I'm getting in my car, how risky is that? Well, now we have a pretty good idea, but in cybersecurity, it was just sort of anybody's guess. And that left a lot of room for the legacy vendors to really fill that void with only, fear mongering and marketing, right? Where if you're a CISO, you kind of would get bombarded by people trying to sell you the thing that you didn't necessarily understood. You didn't even know exactly how to approach it to understand if that's the thing you needed. But at the end of the day, you were kind of forced to go and do something about it. And I think we're moving out past that. And it's funny, you mentioned sort of, aviation. It's one of those great industries where, over the years, over the decades and centuries, we are learning more and more about what the risks are, what we need to do in order to prevent those risks, how to evaluate that. And so that's a great industry that has a lot of maturity. And you would never trust today, right, an airline that just says like, oh yeah, we're super safe. And it's like, okay, but what's the statistics? Like, where's the reports? Like, no reports. Don't worry about it. We're super safe because we have, X, right? That's not a sign of maturity. And so I think we have to grow as an industry out of that space.
Can you talk about when we look at the public sector versus when we look at the private sector? Who is driving? Because security landscape is changing, which also means the companies, they know, as we discussed, but we also need to look at regulations, how prepared governments are. Fortunately, in the US, at least, Biden administration, they came up with a lot of executive orders around security, whether it's like, S bombs, a lot of, other hardening, Kubernetes hardening guidances, or there are a lot of agencies there. In Europe, also, a lot of effort is going on. There are some moves which are good intentions, but bad implementation, like CRAs. So how do you see governments are prepared for this new era of security? Who is staying ahead, the public sector or private sector?
That's a very difficult question. I think the other player in that space that we can't forget is the insurance. Insurance are driving a lot of movement in sort of the compliance space. I would kind of qualify it as in security. It's certainly, I think all of those players are doing great things, and we need to inch by inch kind of move forward, raise the floor of security, right, so that most people are generally safer. The big risk is by going too quickly, I think, ironically, meaning if we raise the requirements across the board, particularly in the way that only a government could do too quickly, what's going to happen is that it's going to put a lot of pressure on the smaller players, right? The smaller companies that may not be able to afford a large cybersecurity program. So these advancements in regulation need to be done in a very gradual way and with a lot of hindsight, meaning with a lot of analysis about what the actual impact it will have. It's very easy in security to go and say everybody should do X, Y, Z, and where yes, those things are more secure, but they also infer a much higher cost. So the ROI there may not be there. There's always more you can do in security. So I think the governments are quite wise about how they're approaching it, and not trying to go 0 to 100 too quickly.
And what kind of engagement is there between government entities and private sector? Or, if you look at LimaCharlie, do you folks have worked and done any work with government agencies to either, through surveys, to collect reports, create generate reports, or for some, to build some, legislator regulations?
Candidly, we're still too small to really kind of register on those types of political radars, I would say. That being
But
said,
we have to bring you there, right?
exactly.
That's the job. That's the point of these interviews, right?
That's right. But the government is absolutely engaging with private sector kind of in a really wide array through a bunch of different programs, usually that kind of target more specific industries. So very often it's done at the intelligence sharing level. And so it's kind of intelligence being propagated through those channels to various industries through various means, and there's really too many to kind of go over.
What kind of solutions you folks have? Do you offer service SaaS or something that folks can get on their cloud, on-prem, private cloud? Just give us a glimpse.
Yeah, so LimaCharlie, I often refer to the cloud providers. It's truly the way to kind of understand it, right? When you work with a cloud provider, it's self-serve. All the APIs are openly documented. You can get access to whatever you want, whenever you want it, whatever scale you want it. It's per usage. And very importantly, I would say, is you can build on top of it, right? A cloud provider is like a utility in the sense that if you're starting a bakery, you never wonder, am I going to be able to get access to the power grid? No. So it's in the same way, hey, will I be able to get access to a cloud provider to build my, tech startup? Obviously. So we take that same approach where if you're doing cybersecurity, and whether that is doing it within your enterprise, or you are running services for a lot of other people, or you're trying to build your own cybersecurity company, you know that you can always access all of the capabilities that we offer. Those capabilities are foundational cybersecurity capabilities. So, we kind of target the things that are really well understood in cybersecurity and have been for, 10, 20 years. That some vendors might be trying to rebrand and kind of, still sell as a point solution, but it's so well understood that we're able to offer it as a primitive, right? As this raw capability, the essence of what that capability is. So whether that's EDR, for example, that's where we started, our data lake, or automation, or data routing and optimization. So all of those core use cases that people doing security operations need. And regardless of where they work, the type of company that they work at, they know they can use us. We're an infrastructure company. That means we're not an MSSP, right? We don't do services for people. We don't do managed, detection and response. So we kind of remain this neutral player, just like a cloud provider would be, generally speaking, in IT.
Can you also talk about some of the, enhancement that you folks recently made to your offerings?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're always constantly, releasing new capabilities. That's the promise of a cloud, and we're really fulfilling it. So that means that constantly our users are able to shed some other solution or some usage of some other solution and kind of really automate that in a single environment through LimaCharlie. So what we're going to be releasing more in the future is we're going to be releasing some larger pieces of the puzzle this year. And really, without going into the specific detail, we kind of try to keep those for whenever they're ready. But really, the way that we look at things, we are not looking to build the capabilities that are completely cutting edge, right? Like these days, so much is being discussed around AI. We're not looking to be this, cutting edge AI company. Rather, we look at the parts of cybersecurity, like I was kind of mentioning, that is so well understood. And we just want to make those available so people don't have to reinvent the wheel. And if you are building this, cutting edge cybersecurity company that uses AI, you're able to, again, go to market just much more fast using LimaCharlie because it's like building on top of a cloud.
We hear a lot about, especially after the whole, as you also said, the early days, so things are changing so fast. What are some of the paradigm shifts that are happening? And I'm not talking about shift left kind of movement, but we are looking at platform-centric approach. We are looking at cloud-native centric approach. We are looking at, hey, solution-centric approach. We also talk about infrastructure as code. So when you look at all these changes that are happening in the industry, what kind of approach? First of all, there is no right and wrong approach, but there are always, right way of doing things, right, wrong way of doing things. So what is your take on these different approaches, and which you feel, from your perspective, from LimaCharlie's perspective, that this is the right approach, at least for our customers?
Yes. So there, like you mentioned, there's no right or wrong answer, truly, but I think I would call out that there's specific approaches that we must keep. And so that would be people that are building innovation in cybersecurity, right? There's a lot of new approaches that need to be done. We need, as an industry, to try things in different ways. So there's a ton of innovation that needs to happen, and we need to preserve that going forward. The other part of that medal is that cybersecurity, the large vendors in cybersecurity, have fundamentally not changed for the past, 15, 20 years. And I think we're seeing a lot of people kind of discussing the topic and trying to rebrand things around platform, right? Like platformization in cybersecurity. We're really just talking mostly, in those cases about a change of name rather than a real change of the actual underlying product. I think the danger there, and that's, obviously, where I see us playing is that looking at the path forward for platformization, there's sort of two big categories, right? There's one where we work in an industry that has a few very, very large vendors. They are the types of vendors that we know today that kind of, absorb the world, right? Meaning that they will go and they acquire other companies. They don't believe that cybersecurity should be done by anybody else, right? They kind of do it all. They do services, they do products, they do everything. The other approach to this is the cloud approach. And I feel like there's a really important distinction in here that IT has figured out and that we must also clearly figure out, which is the IT space realized that by using a cloud provider approach, those large vendors, which cloud providers are, become net accelerators to the industry. Whereas if you take the legacy old school approach of, let's say IBM, right? The old school IBM gigantic single monolithic company, those tend to be innovation inhibitors to the industry. So if you had to go and look forward and say, hey, which of those two paths do we want to happen to cybersecurity? I wholeheartedly believe that we need more cloud providers so that we can accelerate the pace of innovation in the industry, and less of the monolithic vendors that will be net inhibitors.
I also want to talk about one of the hottest topics these days. And these days, the hottest topics are security and Gen AI, right? So when we talk, I do want to talk about Gen AI a bit, but let's look at Gen AI, and that's what I'll ask every company is that Gen AI as a workload to secure, at the same Gen AI to enable security vendors like yours.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and I'm glad you specifically used the wording Gen AI, right? Because that's kind of a more specific or narrow definition versus AI, which kind of includes machine learning and all that other stuff. So I think from a benefit to our industry, Gen AI obviously has the potential to really help bridge that gap with the more junior side of the industry, right? Like junior analysts, and being able to bring them up to speed faster, make them more, effective. So I think that is probably the biggest contribution of Gen AI. Obviously, there's machine learning, all these, related technologies that can have probably much bigger impact, I believe, over the long term in the industry. As for the defending those workloads, I think it's kind of a fascinating thing because as a having been in security for a long time, there's certain types of vulnerabilities that you kind of learn when you learn cybersecurity that nowadays don't, they still exist, but they're not as common as they used to, right? Things like buffer overflows or SQL injection. And I think there's a little bit of irony, I guess, to seeing this new technology and seeing types of attacks like prompt injection, which are philosophically really the same as kind of SQL injection. And so it's interesting to see entirely new powerful technologies come along. And we're kind of realizing that maybe some of the core lessons that we thought we for sure had, we're kind of moving faster than we're able to implement lessons from those things.
What is next in your pipeline Of course, there are a lot of things you cannot share. We'll talk about those things when you're ready to talk to the press and media about that. But just give us a glimpse, a teaser of what to expect from LimaCharlie this year.
So LimaCharlie right now as a product has a very, very large emphasis on streaming, meaning we try to do everything that we do as close to the time of an event as possible, right? We do things as they come in, so that's a streaming fashion. And very powerful, lots of good stuff about it. But there's a lot of problems in cybersecurity that don't conform very well to that view. And so those would be kind of what traditionally you would think about as kind of like data modeling or database type of representation problems, right? Let's say inventory management, for example, is sort of a really good example of, it's not so much about streaming events, it's about this conceptual view of, of the deployment or an enterprise or any of those things. And so we want to go and start attacking that side of that, that type of problem in the industry so that we can really start to offer even more of a holistic set of capabilities to professionals to use in their own environments.
Maxime, thank you so much for joining me today. Not only talk about the company, but the whole how cybersecurity landscape has evolved over time. Thanks for those great insights. It is just, I think we have only scratched the surface today. And I would love to, sit down with you again and talk more as the industry is evolving and also as LimaCharlie is evolving. So thanks for those great insights. And I look forward to a next discussion.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.